to maneuver the spacecraft. Unfortunately, those hypergolics are unable to be breathed. They are toxic, and so this team here is doing those initial safety checks to make sure that it is safe for the rest of the recovery team to approach the spacecraft. They're also checking to make sure that any residuals from the pyros are safe and are not going to cause any issues. We can see the team working their way around the spacecraft to do these basically these sniff tests on all of those Draco thrusters. Approximately 17 hours prior to splashdown, Dragon autonomously undocked from the International Space Station, completed a series of departure burns, jettisoned its trunk section, and performed its final burn, the deorbit burn. This placed the Dragon spacecraft on a trajectory toward Tallahassee, Florida. Dragon successfully re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, followed by deployment of its parachutes to slow the spacecraft down to a gentle splashdown. We're now going to follow the
Freedom. There was communications that those hypergol checks were complete. They didn't find any of that upon those checks, so we'll continue to move through the timeline. Next up is a process called rigging, which you see happening right now on your screen. This is when a SpaceX recovery personnel actually works to climb aboard the capsule and work through procedures ahead of lifting onto the nest of the recovery vessel Megan. We heard it's going to be about 25 minutes or so until that lift actually takes. Private.
Understand. Thank you.
Callouts there indicating that the crew will have the opportunity to do a quick check-in with the SpaceX flight surgeon. This is standard procedure for every Dragon spacecraft when it returns to Earth. It's just an initial check-in, make sure everybody is doing okay. They will also have another check-in with the flight surgeon once they are on board that recovery vessel that you see there in the background. We can now see that SpaceX recovery team member they're on top of the Dragon spacecraft. They are going to be working to install plugs in the Draco thrusters to ensure that none of those... Go ahead, Sandra.
Continuing to get some views of the recovery personnel, both the main recovery vessel Megan, as well as some of those fast boats that we've discussed previously. It looks like just a beautiful day there out off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Weather was pristine. We were able to get undocked from the International Space Station as expected at 10:05 p.m. Pacific time yesterday evening, and Crew Dragon has since completed steps ahead of its
upwind of the spacecraft. The two fast boats have very specific roles. Excuse me. The first approach is focused on immediate safety inspection, as we saw. They do this for spacecraft integrity.
The splashdown today. Jaden, how are you? How was the view from the recovery vessel?
Hi, Sandra. How do you hear me?
I've got you loud and clear, Jaden. It's so great to hear you.
Awesome. So splashdown, Sandra, was nothing
Freedom,
short of
be advised.
spectacular.
We are transitioning the forward link. Comm will be
quickly followed by 4 healthy white and orange main parachutes. We then tracked Dragon all the way down as it slowly propelled into the ocean. And I think I speak for all of us on the ship when I say a new core.
I just love these views. We really see them even better in daytime. But just seeing the recovery team work in tandem to step through each step, to step through each operation. Obviously they're getting quick assists from the honorary part of the recovery team, those dolphins in the water there. We can see that the Dragon capsule and the recovery vessel, that distance is closing. Again, this is just one more step as we continue to work recovery operations for Dragon Freedom, and we anticipate the lift of the Dragon capsule to occur here. And that's a good sign that we're getting even closer to pulling the capsule out of the water. It will then move forward and The capsule will be placed inside of what you can see there is basically a basket. We call it the nest, Dragon nest, where that's where the capsule will be placed in order for it to be translated to the forward end of the vessel and for the astronauts to egress.
And before that does take place, we'll have potentially views of the rigger go ahead and jump off of the spacecraft there.
That typically occurs when the spacecraft is a little bit closer to the recovery vessel, and we usually get a really good view of that particular operation from one of the onboard cameras from the recovery vessel. That is an operation that I have a lot of respect and admiration for, that individual that does that.
So again, Dragon continuing to get closer and closer to the recovery vessel, Megan. You see some of those ropes now coming into view as well. If you are just joining us, Crew 9 splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time with NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Butch Wilmore, Sunny Williams, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. They're now working through procedures to hoist this spacecraft up onto the recovery vessel Megan.
We just saw that hydraulic arm get lowered into the lifting position. That arm will be the mechanism that is utilized to lift Dragon up and out of the water and into the nest located there at the aft end of the recovery vessel.
And the recovery vessel being used today is... We're getting some views now from actually inside the boat.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This view is straight down the recovery vessel. That platform that was closest to the camera, that is the egress platform.
Freedom, rigging is almost complete. Approximately 5 minutes until capsule lift.
Great news there from SpaceX Core. So about 5 minutes left until we see Dragon Freedom get lifted out of the water. That hydraulic arm, as I said before, is the mechanism that will lift it. It's quite swift, actually, the whole process of getting the spacecraft.
Brace for capsule lift.
Bracing.
There it goes, Dragon Freedom being lifted out of the water and onto our recovery vessel, Megan.
So once securely on...
Welcome aboard the recovery vessel. Recovery personnel are completing final checks and stand by for translation to the egress platform.
Freedom copies.
Great news there, letting us know that Dragon Freedom has been successfully recovered from the water's surface. If you've just joined us, we had an on-time splashdown at 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time, and we can now see that the water recovery operations are continuing to progress. The nest where the Dragon spacecraft is located is going to get moved forward. This will happen after one of the recovery crew members does some checks, and we'll also see some hosing. Obviously, the spacecraft splashed down in salt water. Salt water is corrosive, and we want to try and rinse out as much of the salt water as possible to reduce that corrosion on the metallic structures. So we can see some guidance there being provided, really steering the spacecraft properly into the Dragon's nest.
And it's been 30 minutes since Dragon splashed down, and as you can see there, the spacecraft is already on board the recovery vessel Megan. Things continuing to move very smoothly today throughout the entire operations from the deorbit burn up until this point as well.
And Freedom, it looks like the positioning wasn't quite right, so they are working on repositioning the capsule in the nest now.
Once Dragon is fully seated in the nest, we'll probably see a bunch of that salt water come out from the bucket there. Some salt water splash out. As I mentioned before, one of the recovery team members will begin hosing down the exterior of the spacecraft.
So you are continuing to get some great live views on your screen of Crew 9, which includes NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Sunny Williams, Butch Wilmore, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov, who splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Now working to get that spacecraft situated in the nest. Just making some final adjustments and tweaks to ensure that it's nice and secure.
Once the spacecraft is seated and secured and oriented correctly in the nest, Dragon will be moved into the hangar located underneath that helipad that we saw earlier from the aerial views during recovery.
All right, Freedom, looks like you are settled into the nest now.
A doctor that will check out the crew members as standard procedure. As with any spacecraft that is returning from space, we always perform a medical check with the crew. So you will see the crew come out of the capsule and be placed on stretchers, just like with the Soyuz landing and with all of our Dragon splashdowns. That is the nominal procedure.